It's a coffee shop. Okay. And these are the two people we're talking about. There's, this is really dark, but there's the two guys we're talking about. It's Ethan and that's Frank. Okay. And they meet every Saturday at this coffee shop because they love to read. Frank is a lot older than Ethan. Ethan's about in his early 20s, and they've gotten to be really good friends. But Frank has just told Ethan that he's going to be moving to Canada, okay, with his son, because his wife has died. And even though he's lived in that house for like 50 years, his son has offered to have his dad come live with him. And Ethan's pretty sad about that because they've become really good friends. So we're going to pick up the story here. And one more thing is Frank has asked Ethan before he moves if Ethan would come to his house to do a special project with him. So Hank, Ethan doesn't know what Frank has in mind. So let's find out. The next Saturday, I arrived at Hank's house right on time. I knocked on the door and I heard him tell me to come on in. I turned the doorknob and opened the front door. I saw what 50 years worth of stuff looked like. There were piles of paper and photos all over the place. Trinkets and other pretty things were on tables, in cabinets, and on shelves. The walls were covered with paintings and photos. Plus, there were tables and lamps and chairs and so much furniture. Hello there, I heard Frank say as I walked into the front room from the hallway. I'm glad you're here. Can I get you anything? A cup of coffee? Yes, please, I said. I followed Hank into the kitchen. The counters were covered with plates and bowls and coffee mugs. Is this the stuff that used to be in your cabinets? I asked. Well, mostly, Hank said. He poured me a cup of coffee and handed it to me. He refilled his coffee and we sat down at the kitchen table. Hank pushed a stack of papers to the side so we could set our mugs on the table. I have a card for you, I said. I had bought a sympathy card for Hank the day before. I liked what the card said. I wasn't sure what else to write on the card, so I decided just to write, sincerely, your friend Ethan. I hope the card would make Hank feel better. I put it out of my library bag and I handed it to him. Hank took the card and before he even opened it, he put it between his hands and said, thank you, Ethan. I appreciate you thinking about me. And then he opened the card and read it and put it back in the envelope. I will take this to Canada with me. And we smiled at each other. I looked around and saw a glass cabinet full of coffee mugs. You have a lot of things, especially coffee mugs, I said. Yep, everyone I know, they realize that how much I like to drink coffee. Over the years, people have given me a lot of coffee mugs. I was thinking I'd donate my collection to the roast house. What do you think? A lot of people would like to drink coffee out of paper cups nowadays, but some of us still like the nice sturdy mugs. Well, I like mugs, and I think the roast house would like your mugs, I said. Why don't you pick out a mug that you would like to keep? I have plenty to go around, Hank replied. Okay, thanks, Hank, I said. I walked over to the cabinet and looked at all the mugs. Some were from places like Niagara Falls and San Francisco. Others said things like, world's greatest dad, or Merry Christmas. And then I saw a mug that said, coffee is a hug in a mug. And I picked it up. It was green with white letters. I liked it. Can I have this one, Hank? I asked. Sure, it's all yours, said Hank. Are you finished with your coffee? We got a project to do. I picked up my coffee and I finished it in one big gulp. It was warm and comforting, like a hug in a mug. I set the mug down and Hank said, all right then, follow me. Hank got up slowly and I followed him down the hallway to a small room filled with books and papers. Is this your office? I asked. Yeah, this is my office. Amelia called this my hiding spot. I spent a lot of time in here reading and writing and thinking, Hank said. The desk in Hank's office was covered in books and papers. There was also an old leather chair in the corner. It reminded me of the chairs Hank and I liked to sit in at the coffee shop. Next to the chair was a small table with a lamp. The only other things in the room were books. So many books. All the walls had bookshelves and all the bookshelves were full. There were even stacks of books on the floor. I can't take all these books to my son's house. I can't even take half of them. Our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to sort all of these books into piles, Hank said. Okay, well, what are the piles? I asked. Good question, said Hank. One small pile will be books that I'm going to keep or give to my grandchildren. I want to sell some of the nicer ones to the used bookstore. Those books will go in one pile. Another pile of books will be those I'm going to donate to the library. The last pile will be the books that you would like to have. I was surprised. I didn't expect Hank to give me any books. Me? You're going to give me books? I asked. Of course, you and I like books. We like to read. We like to talk about the books we read, and you are my friend. I can't think of anyone else who should have the books. Can you? Hank asked. I guess not, I said. I wasn't sure what to say. All I could think of to say was thank you. So that's what I said. You're quite welcome, Hank replied. He was sitting at a small desk chair and he had already started to sort the books on top of this desk into piles. How do I know which books go into which piles? I asked. Another good question, Hank said. Here is what I'm thinking. I have a bad shoulder and a not so good back. Books can be very heavy, you know. I was hoping you could help me by pulling the books off the shelves. I will take a quick look at them and decide which pile they go in, and then you can put them in the right pile. We'll run out of space quickly in here. So as the piles get larger, I would appreciate you moving them to the bedroom across the hall. I stepped across the hall into the guest bedroom. This room had more empty space than any other room in Hank's. A moment later, Hank walked into the room with some Post-it notes and a pen. On separate notes, he wrote, he, sell, donate. Okay, let's see. Hank walked slowly around the room and put the Post-it notes on the wall, closet door, and dresser. Books I am selling will go here. Books I am donating will go there. Hank explained how he would keep track of the books. I was a little nervous about messing things up. I hope I don't get it wrong, I said. If you have any questions, all you have to do is ask. I believe you will do just fine, but we will go slowly at first. How does that sound? Hank asked. Sounds good, I said. Let's do this. We started our project. I showed the books to Hank as he pulled them off the shelves. If he didn't want to keep the book, he asked me if I wanted it. Most of the time, neither of us wanted the books, so they went into the sell or donate piles. When the piles got big, I moved them to the bedroom across the hall. Hank went with me the first couple of times, but I got the hang of it pretty quickly. We were clearing shelves in no time. Every now and then I would show Hank a book and he would clap his hands together and say, oh, that one's a dandy. If Hank didn't want to keep the book, I would put it in my pile. Hank kept some of the dandies and I kept the rest. I trusted Hank's opinion about the books. I figured if Hank likes this story, I bet I will too. I also kept some other books that looked interesting to me. As we got close to the end of the books, I looked at how many books were in the sell and donate piles. These piles had most of the books. I counted 16 books in the pile of books I was keeping. Hank's small pile of books stayed next to him on the floor by his chair. And here's a picture of all the books with the different sticky notes on them. Okay, letting Ethan know what to do. The last shelves, I said, as I started pulling books from the top shelf of a small bookcase. And here's Frank, and he's looking at each one, make sure which ones he wants to keep. We cleared the top shelf. I pulled the first book from the second shelf and recognized the cover. Hey, this is the book I returned to the library this morning. It was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. Well, that one's a dandy, Hank said with a smile. How did you like it? He asked. Well, it was kind of hard. I only read the first chapter, I said, feeling bad I hadn't finished the book. That's all right, Ethan. This is a challenging book, and you're right about that. I wish I had time to read it with you. That darn moving truck is coming too soon. And he reached his arm out and said, hand me that book, will you? I handed the book to Hank. He looked at the cover and rubbed his hand across it. And then he opened the book and sniffed. Hank told me once that he liked the way books smelled, and I thought that was funny. Hank turned to the very beginning of the book. His eyes got wide and he smiled. He was looking at the page that had all the numbers and addresses and dates. I never paid much attention to that page, but Hank was still looking at the page and smiling. Finally, he said, we got a dandy here for sure. This book is a first edition. Do you know what that means, Ethan? And I shook my head. That means that this book, the one in my hand, was one of the very first copies of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, printed in 1950 in London. Goodness, I forgot I had this. Hank seemed to be very happy about the book. He turned the pages and one of them fell out. Hank carefully put the page back. He looked at the outside of the book. It looked old and dusty and was a yellowish color. Well, it's not in very good shape, Hank began, but it's still a first edition. That means it's worth some money. Really? How much? I asked. Well, I'm not in the collecting business, so I couldn't tell you. And then he closed the book and nodded his head like he made a decision. He handed the book to me. I would like you to have it, Ethan. Are you sure? Don't you want to sell it? I asked. No, I want you to have it. If you decide to read the book, I could talk about it with you over the phone. After I get settled in my son's house, said Hank. I looked at the book and said, I'll try to read it again. Thank you. You don't have to, Ethan. If you decide to sell it, it's up to you. Once you give a gift, you don't get to decide what the person does with it, Hank said, and he sat tall up in his chair. All right, then, we're almost finished. Let's go through the last few shelves and then treat ourselves to a cup of coffee. I have decaf for you, Hank said. Hank remembered that I only drink 1 cup of coffee per day. Hank was a very nice man. He was generous. I felt sad his wife had died, and I felt sad he was moving away. I'm going to miss you when you move, I told Hank. I'll miss you too, Ethan, Hank said. We finished the last few shelves and moved into the kitchen for coffee. Decaf for me. We're going to stop there and we'll take it up next week. What I'm going to do, I've got another book. This is like a post Halloween book. It's sort of funny, but I thought it would be fun for us to read. And then we'll have just enough time to do some reflection. So this has a little boy, and it looks like he's carving a pumpkin. When Tim carved his first pumpkin, it was fierce and funny and just perfect. A jack-o'-lantern, this very well done pumpkin, deserved a name. So Tim gave him one. He called his pumpkin Jack. Long after the best trick-or-treat candy was eaten, Tim still kept Jack the pumpkin. At night, when a candle made Jack's face dance on the wall and filled the dark with warm pumpkin smells, Tim felt Jack was almost magic. Yet, too, the spell was broken. Looks like he's keeping Jack in his room, and there's Jack all lit up. That's the real size of it. And there he is in his own bedroom, looking at the projection of the pumpkin on his wall. And that's what sort of made it magic. Well, said Mom, this pumpkin is beginning to rot. It's time to throw it out. Tim knew it was useless to argue with his mom. He carried Jack to the garden, which was filled with the brown ghosts of last summer's plants. Well, a dead garden is better than a trash can, thought Tim. Still, it made him sad to leave Jack outside and all alone. And there he is. There's Tim, and there's Jack the pumpkin. You can see it is in a garden. He didn't put Jack in the garbage can. Whenever chores or play brought Tim to the garden, he looked at Jack. And every time Jack was different. He became wrinkled and his fierce smile began to look silly. Okay, there he is. Great illustration. Mold began to spread over Jack's bright orange skin. And as the days turned colder, Jack grew flatter. Uh-oh, there he is. He's going back into the garden. Winter began, and soon Jack was hidden beneath snow, and Tim forgot about him. The cold, heavy jacket days came, snowman and sliding days, indoor days, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Valentine days. When all these days had passed and the March winds melted the snow, Tim found Jack. There is Jack right now, pretty well buried in the snow. There wasn't much left of Jack, just a faded and crumbled pumpkin skin, a stem, and a few seeds. Jack's Halloween magic was a distant memory now. Tim scraped a thin blanket of earth over the last bits of his pumpkin. "Goodbye, Jack," he whispered. And you really can hardly see he's gone back totally into the ground. Okay. When spring turned barefoot warm, a tiny sprout appeared where Jack had been. Tim found it and guessed what it was. There's the sprout, and there's Tim. Oh, there he is. Okay, Jack is coming back to life. In the days that followed, Tim weeded and watered and watched the sprout. Slowly and steadily, the plant changed and grew. It branched and spread a web of vines over the ground, but no pumpkins appeared. And there's Tim watering. Okay, boy, look at those leaves. Huge. The days turned hot. Flowers opened on the plant each morning, yellow stars that twisted shut forever in the afternoon. Still, there were no pumpkins. There's the flowers. Finally, Tim found a little green ball growing behind a crumpled blossom. A pumpkin! Tim let out a whoop and ran to show his mom. By August, the plant had spilled into the lawn. Tim's favorite game became pumpkin hunting. He carefully waded among the leaves, searching for green pumpkins, like hidden treasures. And there he is. Okay. School began again, and the days cooled. Tim had less time to visit his garden, and when he did, the pumpkin plant seemed tired. There were few new leaves, and the old tattered ones no longer hid the fat green pumpkins. Then one October morning, Tim woke to see frost coating the garden. The frozen plants changed to pale blue glass. And here they are, all covered with the frosty icy. After school, Tim discovered that what the frost had done. The pumpkin's plant leaves were as limp as wet paper. It was dying. Tim searched among the withered leaves for the unripe pumpkins. He picked them and put them on the front porch, hoping for one more change. Here he is. By Halloween, the pumpkins had ripened to bright orange. There were many, for the plant had been generous. Tim was generous too, and he gave away all but one. All of his friends are coming. And from jack-o'-lantern to seed to pumpkin again, the circle was almost complete. Now it was time for Tim to do his part. He gave his pumpkin a face, and it smiled at him in a fierce and funny way. And Tim smiled too and said, "Welcome back, Jack." Oh. Okay, you guys, those are our stories for today. All right. See, I think we still have time to do some sharing. Okay, so we can unmute and we can do some sharing. Okay. Oh, a couple of questions. Okay. How many of you are going to have a pumpkin on your porch or your house or some place in your family that you like to visit? Is everybody going to have a pumpkin or not?
You know, pumpkin, Eric?
Hopefully.
So Michael's going to have one. Okay. And he's going to tell her, and he's, yep, and he's got her hand out.
Hopefully I will
Okay.
have one too.
Annie. Kelly says, yes, we're going to have one soon. Right. Erin, okay. Erin's got a smile on her face. Thank you. All right. Are people going to, are you guys going to put a face on your pumpkin? Or are you going to carve it? Or, oh, Kate's got some